So we're in chapter 9 of your biology book, and we're talking about the beginning of the digestive system. And I ended up with the pharynx, and then we'll go on to the esophagus. So the pharynx, what is the pharynx? Here's a picture, look right here. What is the pharynx? Well, the pharynx is a funnel shape that goes down into your throat. So it's your throat part. And it's where the food, or that food bolus, after your tongue has put it into a bolus in a round ball, and it pushes it down through the pharynx. The pharynx has actually 6 openings. It has the mouth opening, the pharynx here. So we're talking about the pharynx. It has the mouth opening, and it has an opening that goes to the nasal passage, and it has an open that goes to the 2 openings actually that go to the eustachian tube that go to your ears, and then it goes down to the windpipe, which is basically the trachea and the esophagus. So we have the esophagus and the trachea here. So this is for breathing, and this of course is the esophagus is for eating. So the epiglottis is this little flap that goes, it opens and closes here. So one closes when you're breathing, or when you when you're not eating. When you're eating and you swallow, it opens up so it goes down to the esophagus. So there's 2 tubes, but the pharynx is this part up here. The pharynx, like I said, has the 6 openings that goes to those 6 different parts: your mouth, your nose, your ears, eustachian tubes, and your middle ears, your windpipe, and your esophagus. Okay, pharynx. So now we go on to the esophagus. We're going to talk about the esophagus. What is the esophagus? Well, it's a long muscular tube that connects to the pharynx, as you see there. And the bottom connects to the stomach. So here we have the esophagus coming down this way, and then we see how it connects to the stomach too. The esophagus coming down to the stomach, the bottom section. And it lies behind the windpipe. So here's the trachea, which is the windpipe. It lies behind it. And so when you swallow, it closes opens the esophagus and closes the windpipe. So how does it get down? The peristalsis. It's called peristalsis, and it's like squeezing motion. You squeeze a bit and squeeze a bit more, and it goes down the esophagus. That's peristalsis. You're going to find peristalsis in other areas, such as the small intestine too. Well, it's this rhythmic wave of contractions where the food is moved to all regions and it passes through. So here we go, as we're passing through here, if you go down towards the stomach, the esophagus will pass through what's called the diaphragm. And what is the diaphragm? The diaphragm divides the chest cavity from the abdomen. The diaphragm is going to be very important, especially when we talk about breathing. But the esophagus goes through the diaphragm. So we have talked about the diaphragm. Let's go on to the stomach and onto the intestines here. So let's go on to the next. Another thing here I forgot to say is back up here with the epiglottis and stuff. If choking can happen, when the choking happens, when a person chokes, a person will not be able to cough, speak, or breathe. And a choking victim is when you ever said, oh, it went down the wrong pipe or something. Well, when it's choking, it goes down and blocks the trachea, and then you have a emergency happening there, and maybe medical emergency, so you shouldn't have kids running around with candy or small objects in their mouth. So let's talk about the stomach. Let's go on to here if I can. I'm having a problem with this. So here we go. Probably need a new battery. Okay, we're going to be talking about the stomach here, okay? The stomach is a sack-like, looks like a sack, right? And it's kind of J-shaped. See how it's shaped like this? It comes down here and it's shaped like a J. What the stomach, the main thing that the stomach does is storage. It's good, it stores food. It's below the diaphragm, and it's in the upper abdomen of the body. It has the largest diameter of all of our including the intestines and such of all of our digestive system, it has the largest diameter. And it's lined totally by what? Mucous membranes. And these mucous membranes secrete things that the stomach needs. The stomach actually has 3 layers of muscles. And here's the muscles, one muscle layer. One muscle layer goes through the whole length of it. Another muscle layer goes diagonally, so diagonally, and another muscle encircle. See how these muscles encircle it? So it has 3. When you go to the small intestine, large intestine, they just have 2. But the stomach, so it can move all which ways and churn and stuff, has 3 big muscle layers. And it has peristalsis too, just like the esophagus, which mixes the food and contracts and moves the food, or moves what's called the chyme, because basically the bolus turns into this watery stuff called chyme. And the chyme is right here, C-H-Y-M-E. Going on with it, sometimes your stomach will contract even when you don't have any food in it. It does this so that we can feel hungry, so we'll go out and get some food to eat. So, and basically, as for the digestive juices that come in, there's one important, there's a few, but there's one important, and it's hydrochloric acid. And some cells secrete this from the mucus, this hydrochloric acid. And then others, there's other gastric juices too that are secreted in different cells. But that digestion, first of all, before digestion can even happen here with that, is the hydrochloric acid destroys the juices that have come from the salivary glands, from saliva. So it destroys those, the salivary juices, so that it can begin the digestion in a different way in the stomach. So so let's go on here, see what else we have here. Okay, this tells the peristaltic contractions in the stomach as you see them. So here's the pyloric sphincter, the bottom sphincter. Here's the chyme. Remember, the chyme is the food that's kind of watery and partly digested. And here's the mixing as it goes mixing. See how it's mixing with those circular muscles? And more mixing here. It's mixing on both sides. And then the pyloric sphincter opens. It lets the chyme out. And that's how the stomach does this. So the gastric juice, what's in that gastric juice there, and I went over the hydrochloric acid, and the function of the hydrochloric acid, again, is to soften the food. It also kills bacteria. Any bacteria that's in your food, a lot of it gets totally wiped out or killed in your stomach. And it reacts with some minerals too. And it also provides this acid medium here, hydrochloric acid, because pepsin is an important gastric enzyme that begins the digestion of proteins. This pepsin has to have an acid medium to start working to digest proteins in your stomach. So pepsin. So it has to be, we have to have this acid, hydrochloric acid. So let's go on to the next. We're going to talk about the liver. Let's see. Let's talk a little bit more about the stomach digestion, okay? Before we go on to the liver here. So let's look here, the stomach digestion. Look at my notes here. So the stomach digestion. So we have hydrochloric acid, and it's a medium for pepsin. And this medium activates the pepsin, so the pepsin can digest proteins. And then, of course, pepsin is this gastric enzyme, and most important in digesting proteins and amino acids in the small intestine. And then we have a gastric acid called, or a gastric enzyme called amylase. And amylase is this one here. Amylase digests starch. And then we have gastric enzyme that's lipase, and it digests, or you can say lipase because they're lipids, but it digests fats. And we also have an intrinsic factor, and this binds to the vitamin B12 so that it can prepare and absorb vitamin B12, intrinsic factor. And so these mucous membranes here, they have let out alkaline. Remember, the stomach is very acid with the hydrochloric acid, and hydrochloric acid is corrosive. So you think it could probably eat holes in your stomach, right? Well, the mucous membrane put out this alkaline, which is opposite from acid, and so that it protects, the lining of our stomach. So it's alkaline and the acid is neutralized. So, and anyway, going on here, we talked about peristalsis. The bolus turns to chyme in this thick liquid. And then we have the cardiac sphincter, or cardiac sphincter is between the esophagus and the stomach. And the thick circular muscles. So the cardiac sphincter just prevents the acid to go back up into your esophagus. But if this malfunctions, what we have when a cardiac sphincter malfunctions? We have heartburn. The heartburn happens when our sphincter is not working. And then we have the pyloric sphincters at the end of the stomach, and it keeps the food until the gastric juices are mixed, and then it squirts the chyme out through this sphincter, and through the sphincter goes and it closes, and then you have the food emptying from the stomach into the small intestine. Food in the stomach usually takes about 2 to 4 hours, and the carbs, they digest faster than the protein, and fatty food takes the longest to digest. Okay, so now let's go on to the liver here. Let me get situated here. So we have, okay, there's better. I just want to make sure you can see me here. See this here. The liver and the pancreas. So we're going to talk about the liver first. The liver produces what's called bile. The liver has so many functions. It's like an amazing organ that God made for us. It has so many functions, it's unbelievable. And it goes into all the different systems of our body. So the liver produces bile, and the bile is stored in the gallbladder. And when the bile is stored in the gallbladder, let me see if there's another picture here. I'd like to have a picture of the liver, but maybe you don't have one here. Let's see. No, there's a picture where the liver is, right, actually. So let's keep it right here. So the liver, the bile, it does what's called emulsification. So what is emulsification? Let's go back here and look at that word here. We have the liver and the gallbladder. We have a process called emulsification. Emulsification is basically breaks these large fat droplets down, and so that breaks the lipase down and breaks the fat down into fatty acid. It's kind of, when you think of bile, you think of like if you were washing pans and they were real greasy, you'd have to put a lot of soap on them, dish soap on them, so that it emulsify that all those oils and all, the grease and stuff. And so you can wash it. That's what emulsification does. It's like soap to wash the lipase, or so the lipase can break down. And basically water's not going to break down fats at all, but bile will. So it helps digest fats in the small intestine too, and also it ends the insolubleness with emulsification. Anyway, lipase breaks down into fatty acids, and the gallbladder releases the bile salts when it's needed. So the gallbladder is triggered. All of a sudden we have a lot of fat that needs to be taken care of. Otherwise, we'd have this fat in our blood. This fatty fat would be present, and also in our small intestine, too much fat. So it activates our gallbladder so that we can let go of some of this bile, so that we can break down our fat when we eat fat, a lot of fat. The pancreas now is another. So let's talk about the pancreas. Pancreas is down here. Let's picture pancreas. Here we go. here's the liver, you know, and the ducts for the liver. The liver is like large here. And then we have the gallbladder under here. And now we have this weird little thing called the pancreas. Pancreas is so important because the pancreas puts forth the pancreatic juices and they go through the pancreatic duct, you know, and the duct goes into the small intestine there, and there are 5 different pancreatic juices. And these juices are, you know, let me look, you can look at my notes here. Here's the juices. Pancreatic juices, there are 5 enzymes. There's pancreatic lipase or lipase for fats. There's pancreatic amylase for starch, kind of the same as in the stomach, right? And there's trypsin, and there's chymotrypsin. So we have chymotrypsin and trypsin, and we have carboxyl peptidase. And then we have sodium bicarbonate, kind of like your baking soda. And what this does is makes your stomach so it's not so, it neutralizes the stomach acids and makes them so they're not so corrosive, you know, at that time. So it puts out, so the pancreas does that. So here we have the pancreas here doing these things, which is pretty amazing for this little dealy bob, this little organ. The pancreas too, if people get pancreatic cancer, it's such an important organ. You can die pretty quickly with that. And also, pancreatitis can happen when alcohol affects the pancreas. So that is pretty important. Now let me talk a little bit more about the pancreas here. Let me see if I have it written here. Okay. I guess I didn't write it down. But another thing about the pancreas is that it produces, it has a lot to do with your blood sugar because it produces insulin and glucagon, which regulates a person's blood sugar. So when someone has a problem with their blood sugar, it always like focus there on the pancreas. So I think I'll stop there because we're going to go on to the small and large intestine, and then about just some diseases that can cause problems in the digestive system. So we'll do that in just a little bit. But anyway, let's stop there.